You are listening to Talking Star Wars. Welcome, Star Wars fans.
I'm Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and today we're going to talk about Star Wars.
Like we do from time to time.
So, our subject today is one of the, I would say, key setting building blocks of Star Wars that has appeared since the very first film in A New Hope, and that would be the Bounty Hunter.
It shows the sort of seedy underbelly of this world where there is crime done, bounties placed, and then people kind of in a race to outrun the bounty hunters.
Yeah, so it is certainly a sign of a central authority that does not have enough people or the wherewithal to, empower things like marshals and other official government agents to hunt down criminals. Instead, there are bounties posted for them, and it is up to independent contractors, gunslingers of various kinds, to go and find these individuals and bring them back, dead, alive, in between, for payment in what we see from the Republic, from the Empire, and from the New Republic, or even from independent crime bosses such as Jabba the Hutt or other powerful entities.
And that's interesting because these, we know that at the very first beginning of, or I should say, we know from A New Hope that Han Solo has a bounty on his head. That is a defining character trait of his, where he is a man on the run. And, not watching the special editions, but seeing Jabba the Hutt for the first time in Return of the Jedi and seeing that there is this power in the galaxy outside of the Emperor really helps to show that there is a lot of space in the galaxy, that even the almighty Empire can't have full command over the full galaxy.
And the bounty hunter fills this niche in the setting that it almost seems to be a alternative synonym for mercenary in some contexts, where all the bounty hunters do is not just hunt bounties, even though that does appear to be, sort of their nomenclature, but that's almost something of a legacy term. They will often be hired for other mercenary activities, from Din Djarin being hired to protect a village, to Cad Bane being hired to basically break a strike or intimidate some local police, basically a local marshal, to Asajj Ventress being hired as a general fixer. So they still have this core potential job duty of, yes, we are going to hunt down bounties, but the term is also used in the general sense of gunslinging mercenary who will take pay to do unsavory work.
Which is quite at odds from your typical Jedi, your keeper of the peace. Those are our normal protagonists in a majority of Star Wars tales, so whenever a bounty hunter crops up, it's a kind of a splash of reality into the galaxy.
Yeah, we even see the intersection of Jedi philosophy and bounty hunters in the Magnificent Seven inspired episode of the Clone Wars, where 4 bounty hunters and 3 Jedi have to team up to train a village to defend themselves against pirates. So, bounty hunters themselves seem to be like one of 3 primary factions of seedy underbelly underworld individuals. You have bounty hunters who are mercenaries and hunt bounties. You have smugglers like Han Solo and Lando who prefer not to engage in such violence, but instead skirt the law in moving a cargo from one area to another. They can also be hired to smuggle people and transport things quickly. So there's some overlap there. But you got your bounty hunters, your smugglers, then you have your pirates. And those operate entirely outside of the bounds of any central authority to raid, steal, capture, grift, but also sort of have their own little mini empires across, such as Hondo Ohnaka in charge of the Ohnaka gang.
Because you really have bounty hunters and smugglers who are still beholden to a crime lord, and then pirates who answer to no one but their pirate lord or their captain, their Hondo.
Yeah, and even if Hondo might take payment to do a job for the Separatists or the Republic, though why you would do that with Hondo, I have no idea. He's not trustworthy. None of these people are trustworthy usually, not even Han Solo.
Right.
But so yeah, the bounty hunters join this constellation of, on the other side of the law, probably the most tightly tied to each central authority. But I mean, Boba Fett might do occasional jobs for the Empire when they post a bounty, but he has no allegiance to the Empire. And in fact, his closest allegiance that we see before Jabba the Hutt's death is to Jabba the Hutt.
So, rewinding a little bit just to take a look at bounty hunters on film, bounty hunters in media. When it comes to the original film trilogy, we're really kept to one scene of bounty hunters, plural, where we have Darth Vader just fed up, like, you know what, we've had the full force of the Empire behind us, we still have not captured this asshole. Let's get some bounty hunters to collect the bounty that Jabba has placed on Han Solo's head.
And I think this is a sign that Vader is entirely aware of the limitations of the Imperial war machine. Even when he questions it in A New Hope, when Tarkin is talking of the Death Star, and Vader's like, do not be too proud of this technological monstrosity you have constructed. Technological terror. He is entirely aware and has no particular loyalty to the concept of the Empire itself at this point. He is loyal to Palpatine, but he is entirely willing to go outside the rules because he's still Anakin Skywalker's in there. And it's like, sometimes you just got to go renegade and do what you want to do.
Sometimes I know best, and sometimes is all the time, because I'm Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, so it's not that hard to do a survey of pretty much every bounty hunter that appears in the canon films. So in A New Hope, you have Greedo, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And some of the people that are waiting at Han Solo's ship when Jabba confronts him in the special editions, but none of them are named, and Greedo is dead.
I think Boba Fett appears and looks at the camera
Yes.
in the special edition.
So yeah, but we don't even know who Boba Fett is, and we don't know if he's a bounty hunter or just a hired gun. But then by the time of the setting establishing appearance of a bunch of bounty hunters and the disdain that refined military society hold them in appears in The Empire Strikes Back, and every single one of the bounty hunters that appears that Vader has scraped together goes on to have a long history of backstory and interfighting and rivalry with each other in this constellation of bounty hunters that are present in the setting. There is Dengar with the white wrapping on his head, known for having a variety of crazy weapons and being somewhat of a dick.
And he's really the only human-facing member, because even Boba Fett has a helmet. So he's the only one with a face that is recognizable, and that is not the most attractive face. So we automatically have a sense that these bounty hunters might be a little unsavory.
Yeah, and Boba Fett is even told by Darth Vader directly, no disintegrations. And Darth Vader, though he can't reveal it, has known Boba Fett for most of his life, and is willing to use his talents to try to find Han Solo, but is like, yeah, you're not allowed to use a disruptor. And as we can see from when Din Djarin uses one, using a disruptor disintegration rifle is fairly standard when there's you need to escalate a situation, and it's Darth Vader feeling the need to not threaten Boba Fett, but you're a professional. This is my requirement. Then you have Zuckuss and Forlom. Zuckuss being a force-sensitive Gand, insect person who can try to see the fates of the bounties he's hunting. His droid companion Forlom, who is a reprogrammed insect-like protocol droid, who pilots the ship for Zuckuss.
There's a Bosk who doesn't wear shoes. He's a reptilian alien. Do we talk about him in our Alien series? Do we cover the Trandoshan's?
Yeah, we'll either have or we'll cover the Trandoshan species, but they are bounty hunting is something of a pastime and common profession for Trandoshans, and Bosk is the most famous of them, being a sort of leers down at the Imperial officers as he stands on Darth Vader's Star Destroyer, awaiting to receive his assignment from the Dark Lord of the Sith.
I just looking at Bosk, He's wearing some sort of almost rebellion flight suit. I think it might be yellow, but it's in the same sort of cut. So seeing that, and then calves and are like forearms that are reptilian is just an interesting juxtaposition. So he's one that always stuck out as that's an interesting creature. I mean, the makeup doesn't look comfortable, so I can see why it's Boba Fett capturing Han Solo and not Bosk. But in another world, I can see him being featured more heavily. Um, Otherwise, when it comes to the group, we have IG-88, who is one of the more interesting looking droids. It's like a pipe cleaner in droid form. Uh, but we see a version of this droid in The Mandalorian IG-11, so we actually learn a little bit more about how these droids may operate. And I don't know, they seem very much tightly wired to protocol. We don't see anything as far as IG-88's personality in the film, but is there anything major from outside that was notable?
You're very calculating, very ruthless, very much into um, not droid rights, but droid rights for himself and self improvement, and looks down on all the organic beings around him, while acknowledging that he needs money to continue to upgrade himself.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's all the bounty hunters that appear. You have a couple of droids, weird insect alien, Trandoshan, reptilian race.
A dirty man.
Yeah, sort of this guy with this fancy headdress festooned with weaponry and a Mandalorian, and cool armor.
I always figured that Dengar's head dress was more of a like a medical wrapping, like he lost an ear or something, and he just had to show up like that. But he looks like that in pretty much every media appearance.
Yeah, he like part of it is like protect him from the elements, but it's also just sort of the cultural affectation of his upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think most bounty hunters maintain a distinct appearance as part of their
Mm-hmm.
brand. Yeah, the only other really bounty we get to Return of the Jedi, and of course Boba Fett is being retained at Jabba's court as a um, permanent member at this point. The only other bounty hunter that we see is Boushh. That is the bounty hunter that Leia has disguised herself as after attacking Boushh and stealing their attire, which is distinctive, and face covering, which is why Leia targets Boushh.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
There's a thermal detonator, which is one of the cooler weapons in the Star Wars universe, just based on everyone else's reaction to her whipping it out. I think we actually get to see one in media in one of the more recent shows, but I'm not exactly sure which. It might have been Andor where we see a thermal detonator detonate.
yeah, and it's you know, it's not like a tactical nuke, but it's like it's like if you throw a charge of C4 and it explodes. It's not a threat to be taken lightly. We see
Mm-hmm.
several thermal detonators used in the Bad Batch, and Sabine Wren in Rebels has a penchant for thermal detonators of many kinds, both small and Imperial facility destroying ones.
So yeah, when it comes to the original trilogy and their bounty hunters, they are in this sort of backdrop of working. I'm not even going to say for the Empire, but working at the behest of the Empire, paid by the Empire. And then we have, again, Jabba the Hutt, who's this insular external power, um, which is just a really interesting way to open up a film because we've heard about Jabba the Hutt and we definitely have not seen him in any case. I hate special editions if you haven't told anyone yet. Um, but when we see him for the first time in Return of the Jedi, we see that he is this so different in terms of this isn't the clean tactical nature of the Empire. This is someone who is just sitting in his wealth and not wallowing because wallowing's negative, but he's certainly done well for himself. So bounty hunters are a part of this world with the presence of Boushh and Boba Fett, and we just get this uh, sense of underbelly that Han Solo has always been a part of, and which I think is integral to the Star Wars universe, and should have been more present in the prequel and sequel trilogies. But that's a story for another time.
Well, I think the prevalence of bounty hunting during the Imperial period is definitely a sign of either increased
Mm-hmm.
crime or due against Imperial restrictions, or the Empire giving bounty hunters freer reign because more people are considered criminals. So
Mm-hmm.
we not only have a state apparatus to suppress them, as seen in Andor, but we also have this extrajudicial process where we can just pay dangerous people to bring further criminals in.
Right.
Um,
Just imagine if Hondo Ohnaka was one of the main resistance allies, and how beautiful that would have been in Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. But
yeah, but there's no profit in that.
oh no, oh no. But we're moving on to the next. I mean, there were years of legend stories and bounty hunter stories, mainly involving that clutch from The Empire Strikes Back. But we get a major expansion of bounty hunter culture and just members when we move on to the Clone Wars.
Yes, so not really any bounty hunters that appear in The Phantom Menace.
It's not a story about bounties. It's much more of a fairy tale fantasy, and there's no room for bounty hunters in that.
And the Republic is still strong. There is not yet a state of war. So while bounty hunters exist, they're not the focus of the story. And, before the outbreak of the Clone Wars, it's like a somewhat seedy, but it's like a profession. And then it might be done by dangerous individuals. And what's always interesting, and if we get into the Clone Wars period, is how extrajudicial it all seems. Like, if there's a bounty hunter, if there's a bounty placed on someone, some bounty hunters feel like, okay, no other laws apply to me. I just want to claim the money, and I don't care if this planetary government wants to arrest me. I don't care if I have to gun down people in my way. Definitely a sign of, this is why I think why bounty hunters are disliked, is because they are only in it for the money for many of them.
So they're ruthless in a way.
Not all of them, but many. And the bounty hunters get more ruthless as the Clone Wars goes on. So we don't see any in the Phantom Menace, but then we get to...
We do. We see a very short flash of Aura Singh. She is watching the pod race, and we don't know who Aura Singh is yet, but she will play some role shortly.
Okay, yeah, so we get a character background, which is great, but she's not not bountying and she's not hunting. So.
She doesn't even have a short scene where she is introduced and Imperials look at her feet. So it just doesn't count.
Hey, boss just wants to, he's like, the Imperials do not make boots in my size. So. But then we get to Attack of the Clones, and there are two bounty hunters that appear in this movie that are integral to the plot. Working together.
One of my favorites, just because whenever a toy had a mask, I just loved it as a kid because it's like you got two toys for the price of one. And Zam Wessel, both the 3 3/4 version and the 12-inch version of her toy came with the reptilian face that she transmorphs into. Is that used well in film? No, not at all. It is revealed that she can morph after she has been shot. So it's a cool feature that's used better in the Clone Wars. It's a cool feature that was featured in a toy. But otherwise, she's a female sniper who Anakin and Obi-Wan get on a foot/aerial chase with in Coruscant. They track her down to a bar, and before she can reveal who she's working for, she is assassinated, revealing her metamorphing nature.
Yeah, and this is also a sign that bounty hunters are used for deniable wet work in between governments, because this is Newt Gunray of the Trade Federation before the outbreak of hostilities hiring Jango Fett, our next bounty hunter to talk about, to kill Padme Amidala because he has a personal grudge against Padme. So then Jango Fett, who is the person been chosen by the Kaminoans as the template for the clone army, does not want to risk directly being involved, and so he subcontracts to Zam Wessel and then just coordinates her efforts, wanting to have a cutout between himself and the assassination.
And then Zam Wessel gets a robot, and then the robot uses like leeches.
Well, like incredibly deadly centipedes.
Sure.
All, I think, intended to make her death seem either accidental or in her sleep. But then the centipedes are killed. The droid is followed to Zam Wessel. Zam Wessel flees, and when Zam Wessel's about to give up her employer, Jango kills her.
If only Jango had a long-range explosive weapon on his back that he could use to shoot Padme from afar.
Yeah, but maybe she's in a Senate building, so maybe it's impervious from the outside. So that's why you needed. It's like, okay, we can't blast it, we can't explode it. There's Jedi inside, so it's my contention that the centipedes were used because Jango Fett is at least aware of the existence of Jedi. So if they were aware that Jedi had been assigned as her protectors, which they should be, because Palpatine is the one who assigned them,
Mhm.
and Duke Gunray works for Palpatine.
So it's
Everyone works for
all, yeah,
Palpatine.
yeah, yeah.
So, and he goes through the entire series. It's like, man, it would be. I don't want to expend too much political capital on this, but it would be really great if someone could just murder Padme Amidala. Like, really, if someone could just get her out of the way.
Hmm.
But then he can't be seen overtly killing one of his
Right.
political rivals. So
it needs to be distilled through many layers, but
yeah, Zam Wessel,
yeah.
the Changeling, we see her in the Clone Wars, and yeah, this is definitely a sign of, as tensions increase, this was not bring Padme Amidala back alive for trial. This was, please go murder my political and personal rival, please, at
Yeah.
the behest of a bounty hunter. So we see, assassination being one of the
One of the
tools.
job duties of the standard bounty hunter.
It's ruthless. I mean, Jango Fett murders Zam Wessel rather than have his own identity revealed.
Hmm. And I always questioned, okay, so Jango Fett, one of the best bounty hunters, best drip in all of Star Wars with that chrome armor. And he decides to become a template for cloning. It's like, why would a bounty hunter do that? And the answer kind of becomes clear with one, money. I'm sure he was
Ooh,
paid.
they pay him an enormous sum. It is
Yeah.
implied that he is very well compensated.
Hmm.
He's Mandalorian, which not that is a ethnicity, but it is a
It's a culture.
yeah. And so he's got the chops, the genetic predilection towards quick aim and merciless combat that the
Mhm.
Kaminoans are looking for, and perhaps he has like strong genes. Like maybe there's just a particular his strand cast genetics might be powerful in a way that lets them do cloning, because cloning in Star Wars is somewhat mystical and does not follow the cloning rules
Right.
present in our world.
Each clone is, in a sense, unique and grows to become their own person. Um, so he certainly did it for the money, but he also did it so that he could have his own genetically unaltered son, who becomes Boba Fett.
Yeah, because we never see Django involved in any romantic relationships with anyone. We know that he had a close friendship with Aura Singh, but there's never any implication there's anything romantic there. So, is Django asexual but wanted to have a son? Was there some way he couldn't have children otherwise, and so this was like, but I really want to be a father?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this just like, man, I wouldn't trust any partner to help me raise my child, so because he has hang-ups from his Mandalorian foundling days,
Mm-hmm.
as revealed in the book of Boba Fett. So maybe he's like, I would like to do it better than I was raised.
Sure.
We have no idea what his childhood is like. We don't really delve into the backstory of Jango Fett, other than what Boba Fett reveals, that he was adopted into a Mandalorian clan and then left some point when Duchess Satine ruled Mandalore and tried to reform them into a more peaceful society.
I figured Jango Fett was just busy capturing bounties, didn't have time to settle down, figured he wasn't getting any younger. But, it's one of those mysteries that allows fans to sort of file in their own meanings and makes for some interest. But with all the talk of how skilled Jango Fett is, we see him meet his end in the Attack of the Clones, and there's just a kind of a brief, awesome glimpse that you can tell that he's about to use his jetpack and kind of do the same aversion technique that he used against Kenobi, but his jetpack fails, and he is swiftly subsequently beheaded by Mace Windu.
Yeah, it never really goes great when bounty hunters try to face off against Jedi. When
Mhm.
anyone that doesn't not force sensitive tries to face off against Jedi, the closest we see are some bounty hunters that are specifically kitted out to fight Jedi, and even then, that's more about surviving Jedi than killing Jedi.
Right.
There are bounty hunters that do successfully kill Jedi, especially in the early days of the Clone Wars, when some of the more sage-like, less warrior-like Jedi just are caught unawares and are killed. But as the Clone Wars go on, the Jedi get more and more war-hardened, and it's harder and harder for them to be killed by anyone other than General Grievous or Dooku.
Sure.
So as far as other bounty hunters in the prequel era, we have to turn to the Clone Wars, because by the time Revenge of the Sith comes around, that is a very tightly plotted story. We don't really have any excess characters in that film. We don't watch any bounty hunters. This is all Anakin, all Obi-Wan, all Padme, all Palpatine.
It's very operatic. We don't have Hondo and Akka pop in for a joke. it's a very much more serious honed story.
But in the Clone Wars, the series that bridges the gap, we have lots of bounty hunters,
Mhm.
and again, continuing the trend of Zam Wesell and Jango Fett, and seeing sort of this breakdown in central authority, and the need to hire deniable assets on both sides. We see other figures sort of rise to the fore and trying to take advantage of the chaos. So we see more smugglers, we see more pirates, but we also see an uptick in bounty hunters that show up.
Mhm.
Two most notable ones probably being Cad Bane, who is totally willing to steal a holocron from the Jedi Temple. Again, showing us the bounty hunter is just sort of this general term for dangerous mercenary work that is on perhaps the far side of the law. He's not hunting a bounty. There is just a payment being made to him for stealing this holocron.
And it is so incredibly dangerous to trifle with Jedi. I think it's Ahsoka that they have to contend with during this arc, and that's probably for the best because if Anakin was there, he would have just hurled a lightsaber into.
No, Anakin then follows Cad Bane and
Okay,
Obi-Wan, and
my
Cad Bane
memories.
has a trap set up in his lair for multiple Jedi that show up, and then
Hmm.
he forces Anakin to choose between saving Ahsoka and capturing him. He disguises himself as a clone trooper so that he
Hmm.
can and fakes his own death. He has to break out all of his tricks to survive being tracked by Jedi. Um,
So very clever. He's not a Din Djarin where he just goes in and says, "Hey, I'm gonna take you in," and then a battle ensues. Cad Bane is a little bit more into the subterfuge in order to quietly and efficiently get done what needs doing.
yeah, I think Cad Bane is probably the most dangerous bounty hunter we see, at least on the bounty hunting side,
Mhm.
in that he has absolutely no scruples. He straight up blows up his own droid companion just for a momentary distraction in one episode. He'll murder anyone he's with if he needs to. Um, so where there's like the sort of like honor among thieves, professional ethics thing that even Hondo Onak has at least a little bit of,
Hmm.
Cad Bane lacks that entirely.
Yeah.
But he is very good at what he does, and it establishes sort of this rivalry with Boba Fett, who Boba Fett picks up some of the sort of honorable undertones that Jango Fett maintained.
Hmm.
And Jango Fett was a dangerous murderer, but still, I think, had this code. Cad Bane is useful to Palpatine and Sidious because he doesn't have that chip. He will do for the right amount of money. He will kidnap children. Um, I mean, he's the kind of person where it's like, someone's target is a child. Is that okay? He's like, no, it's not okay. Children cost extra.
We didn't talk about this. It's not part of the deal.
Yeah,
Uh,
since I just up the price, and I'm fine. It's not against my morals, but the more I'm transgressing against the morals of society, the more you have to pay me.
mhm.
And this continues all the way up until Cad Bane remains a recurring character through the Clone Wars, and then is operating under the Imperial period, as we see in the Bad Batch, um, actually hunting a bounty and trying to bring someone in alive. I think times have gotten lean, so he's like, I can't just go murder a whole village for the money. I have to retrieve a child. But then, he stays active all the way up through the early New Republic period, where he is hired by the Hutts to get the spice smuggling on Tatooine back in line, and goes and tries to murder the sheriff of Freetown by doing a slow, intimidating walk in the center of town, killing the deputy and leaving. Um, Before engaging later on in a standoff against Boba Fett himself. Cad Bane having been one of Boba Fett's mentors and early rivals when Boba Fett was just starting out as a bounty hunter like 30 years before,
And it
40 years
shows,
before.
yeah, it shows that there is some benefit to growth. And not a whole lot of people say, hey, the Book of Boba Fett is perfect without flaws, but it does. I mean, its whole point is to show the growth in a static character, and Boba Fett is a static character for much of the original trilogy, and for them to actually develop him, turn him into a sort of more well-rounded person, and then put him up against Cad Bane, who is like, uh,
Has not changed in
no,
50 years. So this is the Book of Boba Fett is really the inciting incident of what changed Boba Fett from just going through life as a brutal bounty hunter like his father his entire life.
mhm.
And then Cad Bane serves as the example of someone who has not found a different purpose or goal and is just, I mean, we don't see Cad Bane having a better ship, somewhere he goes. He has not retired to a tropical planet somewhere.
He's working.
Yeah, he's badass and he's cool and he's still fast on the draw with a blaster despite being this elderly Duros walking into town. But he doesn't. What does he have to show for it? He's got a reputation still. In that, I think at least Cobb Vanth knows who he is. Boba Fett still knows who he is.
He's got the
But
best hat in the business.
do not sleep on the quality of the hat. And the hat or the helmet in the Bounty Hunter game is very important.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Boba Fett is trying to escape that life and build something, I think, more, which the quality of how that's depicted, we can argue. But Cad Bane, for all his, like, how he shows up and he's badass, it's like, what has he gotten for his 50 years in the bounty hunting game? What does he have to show for it other than a scary reputation?
Right.
If he was really good at it, shouldn't he have done, what Caribbean pirates did and stolen a bunch of gold for 5 or 6 years and then retired to some island somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Does he take too much satisfaction? Or has his fortunes changed and he always needs the money? He's always grifting and scrabbling to get by.
Could be that it's a fact that he can never sort of replace that thrill of bounty hunting.
Or when you start working for the wrong people, they can always call on you again. They don't let you leave the game. Right. I think one thing Boba Fett wants to do is leave the game. He was tired of people having power over him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's time for him to gather power.
Yeah. So, continuing on the bounty hunter train, we have more we can talk about. But let's look at the New Republic, Rise of the First Order era. And I think the New Republic doesn't like hiring bounty hunters because they want to be squeaky clean and fresh image, but they do have them. We see them employ several bounty hunters in the Aftermath trilogy. So if everyone remembers from the Magnificent Seven episode of the Clone Wars, there is a Zabrak Sugi who leads a band of bounty hunters. Embo, he of the fancy hat and wolf companion, is also part of her squad, helping defend this village. Sugi's niece, Jas Amiri, has become a bounty hunter herself and ends up working primarily for the New Republic to hunt down escaped Imperial war criminals. As we've seen in both Ahsoka and The Mandalorian, there are some reformed Imperials who are certainly allowed into the Imperial service, but as established in Alphabet Squadron and the Aftermath trilogy and other places, that's only if you're not someone like Moff Gideon or someone who was renowned for killing a ton of people. There were there are thousands of Imperials who are wanted. You don't get a pass if you were a Moff, or a Grand Moff, or the leader of a terror brigade of stormtroopers. So Jas Amiri tries to hunt them down, but even mentions that even a couple of years after the Battle of Endor, and especially after the Battle of Jakku, bounties start drying up. We even see this when Din Djarin, 5 years after the Battle of Yavin, 4 years after the Battle of Jakku, is struggling to get well-paying bounty hunter work from the Bounty Hunters Guild, which is presumably endorsed. It seems to be a quasi-independent organization in that it is not directly licensed by the New Republic, but the New Republic does deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but most of the bounties that the New Republic is offering are like bail jumpers, people who are wanted by either planetary governments or the New Republic for just not showing up for court for a variety of petty expenses.
Brought in alive. Yeah. And, that's why Din decides to take the job that leads him to Grogu, even though it doesn't have the, what do they call it, the puck? The puck that allows you to find any bounty?
Yes, because that's a government thing. It's not applied to someone's, like, chain code. It appears to be some kind of fancy technology that allows you to see where a particular genetic being is. It's presumably produced by the New Republic. So this is for an Imperial remnant. So obviously not endorsed by the New Republic. And yeah, so Din Djarin doesn't have time to do a lot of bounty hunting while he's trying to be a single dad, but it's still his primary profession. And by the end of season 3, he wants to be a bounty hunter working on primarily the right side of the law, directly for Carson Teva, captain of the New Republic Navy.
And even at the end of season 3, Din Djarin just wants to sit down and he wants to relax. So he's kind of at the same point of his arc as Boba Fett, where instead of learning that he wants to rule, he learns that he wants to settle down and be an adoptive father, which is kind of where Jango Fett was going, but didn't get the opportunity to.
Yeah, who knows what Jango Fett's long-term plans were, but then he tried to 1v1 Mace Windu, so
Yeah.
which is not a good decision. Anyone should, I mean, not even Palpatine was able to
Hmm.
1v1 Mace Windu, so
He should have tossed his tiny little cable around him like Boba Fett tried to do to Luke. That always works. It doesn't.
yeah.
Spoilers, it doesn't.
Yeah, so in The Force Awakens and so on, we have opportunities where bounty hunters could have shown up, but they do not. The First Order is, unlike the Empire is a bureaucratic military machine, the First Order is like a cult-like military junta and, proto-fascist, like, military state.
Yeah, they'll just carpet bomb planet.
Yeah, they would prefer to send First Order aligned troopers to, hunt through the streets of Kimiji or to um, uh, find whoever they need to. They don't really hire independent contractors because they don't trust anyone who's outside the First Order.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the Empire trusted bounty hunters, but they were willing to provide a service. The First Order is much more insular, and so while they do have agents and spies and do sometimes accept independent contractor help, you don't really. It's mentioned in a couple of the novels. The First Order would primarily send someone like Captain Phasma or a trooper squad to investigate potential resistance activity rather than, oh, we'll just put a bounty out on this person.
So between the formation of the First Order, we can also see the New Republic. They're not super keen towards bounty hunters, as we've discussed, and also the Mandalorians have settled, and half the bounty hunters in the galaxy were Mandalorians. It seemed like. So now that they've settled down and started to restart their own culture, it's almost natural for the seedy underbelly of the galaxy to recede. But I will say I do miss it. If we had a stronger contingent of Han Solo's smuggling background in the First Awakens and how he returned, or something with Maz Kanata continuing on after Force Awakens, being part of the culture and environment.
Yeah, so I guess we do actually have to mention from The Force Awakens, there are a couple of bounty hunter adjacent groups.
Mm-hmm.
They're more like crime gangs, more in our pirate sort of spectrum, but there is a price on Han Solo's head and they are trying to collect it.
Mm-hmm.
So, technically bounty hunting. Though
And they're more like cartels at this point rather than individual hunters.
Yeah, that would be the Guavian Death Gang.
Mm-hmm. And Kanja Club.
Led by Tasu Leech, taking their name from their place of origin, Nar Kanji.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Guavian Death Squad we see is almost cult-like. It's one of the few pieces of world building that's actually interesting in Star Wars Resistance. You'll learn more about the Guavian Death Gang. Not that they're particularly. I mean, they mostly seem like a bunch of edgelords who rule this area of space and have a scary reputation.
And cool masks. Cool masks.
Yeah. So, and those squads do actually, we do see the First Order has put a price on BB-8's, body, head,
dome, sphere,
chassis.
Yeah.
And they do try to collect on it. So, at least at that point, before Starkiller Base is operational, they are willing to deal with the seedier underbelly. And then they do offer money to DJ, the Slicer from The Last Jedi, to turn on them. So again, they're not above using money and power as an influence, but I don't see Brendel Hux or Kylo Ren wanting to go and hire a bunch of mercenaries to go and hunt down Rey. By that point, it's like Kylo Ren is like, I will go myself.
Yeah, even more so than his grandfather. He will put himself on the front lines and get the job done himself.
Yeah. But then, talking about like the intersection of Jedi and bounty hunters, we can't complete that conversation without talking about
Asajj Ventress?
Asajj Ventress, yes, who is a Sith assassin turned bounty hunter, then goes back to Sith assassin before she dies.
That's what I'd say is a missed opportunity. I know we've discussed in the past the missed opportunities of Star Wars and how usually, in my mind, it relates to the sequel trilogy, but I would say Asajj Ventress is one. I know that she had a major arc. They concluded it in a book, but having her in general, her design was one of the concept pieces for whoever Count Dooku was going to be before Christopher Lee was hired on.
Yeah, so I mean, Ventress is doing a ton of world building. She's a Night Sister of Dathomir, former Jedi Padawan, turned recruited Sith assassin for Dooku as a deniable asset. Dooku's forced to attempt to kill her by Sidious, as Sidious's attempt to maintain control of the Sith. And then she becomes an independent bounty hunter, just working by herself, and even gets an uneasy friendship a couple points with Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah.
Before her need for revenge against Dooku leaves her susceptible to Quinlan Voss's attempt to assassinate Dooku at the behest of the Jedi Council, and then she dies trying to assassinate, in the novel Dark Disciple, trying to assassinate Count Dooku.
So, we get deeper, or I should say, we get deep characterizations with Din Djarin and Boba Fett to some extent, but being able to see Asajj Ventress's progression from, humble Jedi to Sith to bounty hunter is something that is fascinating. It's unique amongst the characterizations in Star Wars.
Yeah, and this goes into bounty hunters as people, and what lives do they have outside of their work. And we see there's this game of reputation. Asajj Ventress eventually goes up against Boba Fett's crew and comes out on top and earns reputation that way. Mm-hmm. And then we have Aurra Sing, who we've mentioned before, and was one of Boba Fett's adopted mother figure for a bit, being a terrible influence on the boy. And we know that Beckett, the smuggler that eventually becomes Han Solo's mentor, got most of his reputation from killing Aurra Sing. Mm-hmm. Though technically it was not him that killed her, it was the stop. The fall, as he says, in Beckett fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a survey of all the prominent bounty hunters that have appeared in canon media. There are obviously more bounty hunters we haven't mentioned. IG-11, another bounty hunting droid that shows up in The Mandalorian, many other one-off or unnamed bounty hunters. More Mandalorians that work as bounty hunters to make ends meet. But I think the takeaway here is to view bounty hunters as operating sort of on the edges of society, and to see them filling in this mercenary deniable asset space, like they're private military contractors almost. So while their name is something of a relic in that is one thing that they do, but it is not the only thing that they do. So you can hire a bounty hunter, they're just a person that will inflict violence for money on your behalf. In some specialize in various areas, and others, will take any job that comes their way, a la Cad Bane.
Whenever I take a look at a piece of Star Wars media, unless it's something like Andor, which is trying deliberately to be in its own genre, or Rogue One, like that. But if it's a standard Star Wars story, I look for a formula, a recipe, lightsaber, force users, Imperial assets.
Space battle.
Bounty hunters or the criminal underworld are always a part of that mix, just because Star Wars is not a utopia like Star Trek. There is this underside, not just the dark side, but there is this element of criminality in the Star Wars universe that makes it this unique future. So, the best pieces of Star Wars media always have a balanced recipe. So, that's why I think that bounty hunters, smugglers, there always needs to be some asset of that included for something to feel like Star Wars.
Yeah. So that is our survey of the role of bounty hunters and prominent bounty hunters in the Star Wars universe.
If we forgot anything, please let us know in the comments or at Reddit/Talking Star Wars. Did I get that right?
So at Reddit.r/Talking Star Wars.
I knew I forgot something. And until next time, Star Wars fans.